Pack your things, Lydia.
Pack out! I want
That
you
was
out of
the
here now.
first thing my
Fine,
son-in-law
I'm
said to me
going.
that morning. No greeting, no explanation, just those cold words. He stood there, pointing toward my room, while his mother watched with folded arms. "You eat too much," he said. "You don't help anyone. You sit in mom's chair. You don't feed the dogs. You just sit and watch TV all day. Mom says you even attack her in her dreams." I looked at my daughter, hoping she'd speak up for me, but she didn't. She just stared at the floor. In that moment, I realized love can turn into silence, and silence can throw you out of your own home. If you've ever been blamed for things you never did, this story will speak to your soul. Subscribe and stay with me till the end. You'll understand why leaving was the best thing that ever happened to me. It started at breakfast. Not with shouting, not with chaos, just silence. The kind of silence that sits heavy on your chest and tells you something has already gone wrong. I sat at the table where I'd always sat, my seat, my comfort, and poured tea for everyone. But no one looked at me. Not Evan, not Claire, not even Helen, though she was the one who had taken my chair at the head of the table weeks ago. She sat there that morning like a queen in her rightful place, her pearls shining against her neck. My own daughter sat beside her, pretending to scroll through her phone as if looking at me was suddenly a sin. I tried to smile, to lighten the air. "Did something happen?" I asked softly. Evan looked up, my son-in-law, the one who once called me Mom, and said in a tone I'd never heard before, "You sit where my mother sits now, Lydia. She's uncomfortable." The words hit me harder than they should have. "I've always sat here," I said, trying to laugh it off. Helen smiled, that cold, polite smile that never reached her eyes. "Yes, dear, but every home has its order, and lately you've forgotten yours." I blinked at her. "My order?" She took a slow sip of tea. "You mean well, Lydia, but you take up too much space. You move things around, you correct the maids, you pour too much milk. It's unsettling. You make everyone nervous." I stared at her, my chest tightening. "I only help." Helen tilted her head. "Sometimes helping too much feels like controlling." Evan sighed. "She's right. You've been overwhelming lately. The house needs balance." Balance. That's what they called it. The slow erasure of everything I'd built here. I looked at Claire, my daughter, the one I raised alone after her father died. I searched her face for even a flicker of defense. "Claire," I whispered, "say something." Her fingers trembled around her phone. "Mom, maybe just listen. Don't get defensive." That's when I realized it wasn't just Helen. She'd already won them. The rest of the day was a slow, deliberate torture. Every move I made was wrong. Every breath felt noticed. When I poured water for Evan, Helen sighed and said, "She does that even when she isn't asked." When I offered to fold laundry, she said, "Oh, no, dear. You've done enough for a lifetime." That evening, I stood by the kitchen window, watching the sky turn red. I'd never felt so unwanted in a place that had once been my home. Evan came in quietly, his eyes avoiding mine. "You should start thinking about moving out, Lydia. Mom needs peace." Peace. That word again. Apparently, peace meant my absence. I didn't argue. I didn't even cry. I just nodded. Because somehow, I'd already known this day would come. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the ticking of the clock, feeling the house breathe without me. Around midnight,
I heard voices from down the hall. Helen's room. Her voice was soft but sharp, like the hiss of a knife. She whispered to Evan, "You did well today. Don't worry, she'll start thinking of leaving on her own soon." Evan mumbled something, his voice low, exhausted. "I just don't want drama." Helen chuckled. "There won't be. People like her always leave quietly. Pride won't let her stay where she's not wanted." I stood there frozen outside their door, holding my breath until my chest burned. They thought I'd leave quietly. They thought they had broken me already. I went back to my room and sat by the window until dawn. The sun rose slow and pale, like it was afraid to touch this house. I whispered to myself, "They're already pushing me out, and I'm still pretending I belong." That's when I decided I wouldn't leave quietly, but I also wouldn't scream. No, I'd let the truth speak for me when the time was right.
The next morning, the air inside that house felt heavier, thicker somehow, as if even the walls were holding their breath, waiting for me to give up. I walked into the kitchen early, hoping to make breakfast like I always did. It used to be my favorite part of the day. Coffee brewing, sunlight sneaking through the curtains, the smell of toast filling the room. But before I could even set the kettle down, Helen's voice came floating from behind me. "Don't bother, Lydia. The house girls have it covered. You'll only make a mess." Her words slipped into me like a pin to the heart. I was just... She cut me off with a gentle laugh. "Of course you were. Always doing what no one asked for." When Evan and Claire came down, the conversation started small, innocent even. But like everything else these days, it turned into another list of what I was doing wrong. "Mom," Evan said carefully, "we can't keep spending this much on groceries every week. The pantry empties too fast." I frowned. "I don't eat more than anyone else here." Helen sighed, like she pitied me. "Oh, Lydia, it's not about food. It's about consideration. You forget you're not the only one here." Evan added, "And maybe try helping the maids more. Mom says they're always doing your part." "My part?" I repeated softly. "I've never left them to work alone." Helen smiled, the kind of smile that hides satisfaction behind grace. "Well, it must be a misunderstanding then. But you see, when everyone starts misunderstanding you, maybe it's time to look in the mirror." My throat burned, but I stayed quiet. Arguing with her was like trying to catch smoke. She twisted everything into something else. Later that day, I sat in the garden, trying to breathe, trying to remember what peace used to feel like. The flowers I'd planted were blooming beautifully, but even they seemed like strangers now. I heard her voice again from the veranda. Helen never spoke softly when she wanted to be heard. She said to Claire, "Look at her, always sitting there staring at me like a snake in the grass." Claire said something I couldn't catch, and Helen sighed dramatically. "Don't defend her, darling. You don't see it yet, but that woman thrives on pity." That woman. Not your mother. Not Lydia. Just that woman. My hands shook. I put the watering can down before they could see the tears. That night, I sat at my small desk and opened my diary. It used to be full of recipes and happy things, but I turned to a blank page and wrote across the top, "The list of my sins." Then I began writing what they'd said about me. You eat too much. You don't help the maids. You waste food. You don't feed the dogs. You bring bad energy into the house. You attack her in her dreams. Each line felt like carving into my own heart. I remembered the truth behind each one. The dogs, they'd been my little joy every morning. I'd fed them before sunrise until Helen started calling them inside herself, telling Evan I'd neglected them. Cleaning, the floors had been spotless until she accused me of showing off. Reading, The one thing that calmed me, she called it a lazy woman's escape. Even my silence, my only weapon left, she twisted into arrogance. As I was writing, a knock came at my door. I wiped my eyes quickly before answering. It was the youngest maid, a timid girl with shaking hands. "Madam Lydia?" she whispered, glancing down the hall. "Please don't tell anyone I came." "What's wrong, dear?" Her voice trembled. "Madam Helen told us not to listen to you anymore. She said you're not right in the head, that you forget things, that you might hurt us if we cross you." The words struck like lightning. "She said that?" The girl nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't believe her, but the others do. Please forgive me." Before I could speak, she was gone. I sat there in the silence, shaking. That was the night my heart finally broke, not because of what they believed, but because of how easily they did. I reached for my diary again, but before I could write another word, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a message, an unknown number. "If you want to know why they turned on you, meet me tomorrow at 4. My first instinct was fear, then anger, then something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Maybe the truth wasn't buried yet. I read the message again and again until the words blurred. Then I whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow I'll find out what you've done to me." And for the first time in weeks, I felt my heart beat with something stronger than pain.
The next morning, I woke up to the sound of screaming. It was Helen. Her voice tore through the walls like thunder. For a moment, I thought she'd fallen, but when I reached her room, she was sitting upright in bed, clutching her throat, gasping for breath. Her eyes met mine and widened in horror. "Stay away from me," she shrieked. "You were here. You were choking me." I stood frozen. "What are you talking about?" Evan came rushing in, panic written across his face. Helen pointed straight at me, her hand trembling. She was standing right there, pressing her hands on my neck. I woke up and couldn't breathe. I looked at Evan, pleading. "You know that's not true. I haven't left my room all night." He didn't look at me. "Mom wouldn't make this up, Lydia. Why would she?" "Because she's cruel," I whispered. Helen's voice broke into a pitiful sob. "I only wanted peace in this home. She hates me, Evan. She wants to replace me. She wants you for herself." The words hung in the air like poison. "Enough," I said, my voice shaking. "How dare you say something so vile?" Evan slammed his hand against the wall. "That's enough, Lydia. You're destroying this family. Mom is afraid to sleep because of you." I stared at him, at my daughter who stood silently behind him, and felt something inside me collapse. I wasn't just losing them, I'd already lost them. That afternoon, Helen invited her 2 church friends to the house. They arrived carrying candles and holy oil, whispering prayers as they moved from room to room. I sat in the corner, too tired to argue. The women cast glances at me, their faces full of pity and suspicion. When they entered Helen's room, she gasped and clutched her chest dramatically. "The spirit is strong," one of them whispered. Helen nodded weakly. "It's her. She brings darkness. I feel it whenever she's near." I turned away. Even the air felt heavy with deceit. The maids crossed themselves when I passed. Claire couldn't look at me anymore. By evening, I'd become a ghost in my own life. The next few days were worse. Every whisper carried a new accusation. They said I stole food from the kitchen, that I gossiped about them to the neighbors, that I wanted to take over the house. Even the gardener stopped greeting me. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in my room with my diary. The pages were full now. Every lie, every insult, every small death of my dignity. I read it all, my own handwriting staring back at me like a stranger's voice. "You eat too much. You are lazy. You bring bad energy. You attack her in dreams. You want to destroy them." I pressed my fingers against the ink until it smudged. "No," I whispered to myself, "no, I won't let this be who I am." That's when I realized it.
None of this was random. Every word, every rumor, it was too precise. This was planned. Someone wanted me gone. Someone outside this house had helped make it happen. Around dawn, I heard voices outside. My curtains were drawn, but curiosity dragged me toward the window. I lifted one corner and froze. Helen was at the gate, wearing her robe, talking to a man in a dark jacket. He handed her something small, an envelope. She gave him a quick nod and slipped it under her shawl. The car that waited for him was familiar. My heart pounded when I remembered the message I'd received the night before. If you want to know why they turned on you, meet me tomorrow at 4. The man, the envelope, the message, it was all connected. Helen glanced around, then went back inside. I dropped the curtain, trembling. The lies had always been too organized, too rehearsed, and now I knew why. I turned to my suitcase in the corner. It had been sitting there half-packed for weeks, as if my heart had known this day was coming. Slowly, I began folding my clothes. Each fold felt final. Each item I packed felt like saying goodbye to a version of myself that had died in that house. I placed my husband's photograph on top of everything and whispered, "You'd tell me to walk away, wouldn't you, before I lose the rest of me?" Outside, the first light of morning crept through the curtains. My reflection in the window didn't look broken anymore. It looked determined. "I'll learn soon," I said softly, "that lies can't bury truth." I lifted my suitcase, took one last look around the room that used to be mine, and stepped out of the house that turned me into a stranger. I didn't look back.
When I left that house, it rained. Not a soft drizzle, not the kind of rain that cools your skin. No, this was heavy, relentless, angry rain. The kind that follows you for days, as if the sky itself has taken sides. I remember standing outside the bus station, clutching my suitcase, watching water stream down the cracked pavement. My shoes were soaked, my hair plastered to my face, and still I couldn't move. I had nowhere to go. No home, no family, just the faint echo of Helen's voice still ringing in my head. "You don't belong here." When Mary Ann found me, I must have looked like a ghost. She was an old friend, one of the few I had left. "Lydia," she gasped, "what happened to you?" I wanted to explain, but the words wouldn't come. So she didn't ask again. She just put her arm around me and said, "Come home with me." Her home was a small bakery on the edge of town, 2 rooms above it, one of which she hadn't used in years. "It's not much," she said softly, "but it's warm." Warm. I hadn't heard that word in a long time. The first few nights, I couldn't sleep. The bed creaked, the air smelled of yeast and sugar, and the rain kept tapping against the window like a reminder that the world was still watching me grieve. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Helen's smirk, Evan's cold stare, Claire's silence. I'd wake up in tears, whispering into the dark, "Why me?" But Mary Ann never pried. She'd leave a cup of tea by my door each morning, and somehow that small act became my reason to get up. A week later, she offered me work in the bakery. "You always had gentle hands, hands that heal, not hurt." I hesitated. "I don't think I can face people yet." "You don't have to face them, just bake." So I did. The first time I touched the dough, I cried. Not loudly, just a slow, trembling release. I realized it had been months since I'd done anything that wasn't met with criticism or contempt. I kneaded the dough as if pressing my pain into it, shaping something that might finally rise again. People began to notice the change in the bakery. Customers smiled more, laughter filled the space. They started calling me Miss Lydia, the gentle one. They said my presence made the bread taste softer, the shop warmer. I smiled and thanked them, but inside, the ache never fully left. Because the same gentleness they loved now was the same gentleness Helen called weakness. Weeks passed, and I began to hear things, whispered rumors from customers who didn't realize I was listening. They said Evan's business was collapsing, that Helen had fallen ill, bedridden and bitter, that Claire's marriage had begun to crumble under guilt and silence. They called it misfortune. I called it balance. But I didn't celebrate it.
No part of me wanted revenge through suffering. I had seen enough pain to know it never really ends. It just changes direction. Still, hearing that their perfect home was cracking gave me a strange kind of closure. One afternoon, when the rain had finally slowed to a soft mist, a boy no older than 10 walked into the bakery, holding a brown envelope. "Miss Lydia?" he asked. "Yes, sweetheart?" "Someone told me to give this to you." "Who?" He shrugged. "A man outside. He said it was important." He left before I could ask anything else. The envelope was damp at the edges. My name was written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. For a long time, I just stared at it, afraid to open it, afraid of what truth might spill out this time. When the bakery closed that night, I sat alone at the counter and tore it open. 3 photographs slipped out. The first showed Helen in a lawyer's office, her posture straight, her face glowing with pride. The second showed Evan outside the same office, signing papers. And the third, the house. My house. The one I built with my late husband. On the gate was a sign, "Transfer of ownership pending." I turned the photo over, and written in black ink were 4 words that stopped my breath. "The papers are ready." I couldn't move. I couldn't think. My body felt like stone. They hadn't just lied about me. They had planned everything. The humiliation, the accusations, the exile. It wasn't about food or chores or chairs or dreams. It was about ownership. It was about taking the last thing that tied me to my husband. I pressed the photos against my chest and sobbed until my body shook. Not from sadness this time, but from something stronger. Rage. Quiet and clean. When the tears finally stopped, I looked up at the ceiling. The rain had eased to a drizzle, like it had grown tired of crying for me. "They took everything," I whispered, "but not my truth." That night, I opened my diary again, the same one that once held my pain, and wrote only one line. "They built their peace on my suffering, but peace built on lies never lasts." Then I closed the book, blew out the candle, and stared into the darkness with dry eyes, because the rain had finally washed away my tears and left behind only resolve.
It's strange how peace can grow in one place while misery spreads somewhere else. Every morning, I open the bakery doors to sunlight and laughter, but in the same town, not so far away, my old home had turned into something dark and hollow. I didn't have to hear it from Claire or Evan. People talked. Customers whispered while waiting for their bread. They said the Anderson house wasn't the same anymore. The flowers had died. The paint had peeled. Even the air inside felt cold. Someone said Helen had started talking to herself, that she kept muttering about seeing my face in mirrors. They said she woke up screaming at night, calling my name. When I heard that, I didn't feel joy, just a quiet ache. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was justice. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. Evan's business had begun to fall apart. Deals kept slipping through his fingers, clients withdrawing one by one. And Claire, my daughter, they said she barely smiled anymore. She went from room to room like a ghost, avoiding her husband's eyes. The house that had cast me out was rotting from the inside, and part of me wondered if that's what happens when you build your peace on lies. Meanwhile, the bakery was full of warmth. Marianne laughed easily. Customers called me Miss Lydia, the gentle one, and the smell of sugar and dough clung to my hands like comfort itself. But one afternoon, the past found me again. It was a quiet day, the kind where the sun feels too gentle to be real. A man came in, a stranger, with tired eyes and a kind smile. He ordered a loaf of bread, and then paused before paying. "Are you Miss Lydia Porter?" he asked. "Yes," I said, surprised. He nodded. "I thought so. I used to work as a legal clerk. I recognize your name. Helen Anderson. Does that name mean anything to you?" The sound of it made my chest tighten. "Yes, she's my former family."
He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. I shouldn't be saying this, but I saw your name on a file months ago. Property transfer papers. The signature looked off. I remember it because your name stuck with me. I blinked. You mean she... He nodded slowly. I can't say more, but I thought you should know. Be careful who you trust. When he left, I stood behind the counter, the loaf of bread untouched on the table. I couldn't move. My hands trembled, but not from fear, something sharper. Realization. The house hadn't just turned cold by chance. Helen had taken more than my peace. She had taken my name, my signature, my home. That night, I opened the old brown envelope again, the one with the photographs. I stared at Helen's smug face in the lawyer's office and finally saw what I'd missed before. The date on the papers. It was weeks before she started accusing me of anything. All the lies, all the humiliation. It had been preparation, a cover. She needed me gone before the documents went through. My breath shook as I whispered, "You didn't just hate me, Helen. You planned me." A few days later, the bakery door opened again, but this time it was Claire. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her clothes rumpled like she hadn't slept in days. When she saw me, her lips quivered. "Mom?" I froze. It had been months since I heard her call me that. She stepped forward, clutching a bundle of papers in her hands. "I found them," she said, her voice breaking. "The property papers. She forged your signature. She took everything. And I knew something was wrong, but I didn't say anything. I was scared, Mom. I was scared of losing him, of losing everything." Her words stabbed deep. I wanted to be angry, but all I saw was my little girl, broken, guilt-ridden, and still mine. I reached out, wiping her tears. "You didn't lose me," I whispered. "You just lost your truth for a while, but you can still find it again." She cried harder, clutching my hands. "Mom, we were wrong. We believed her. And she's still lying." I nodded slowly, feeling the storm inside me calm. "I know." Behind her tears, I saw the woman she could still become, the part of her that was mine, the part that Helen could never take. When she left that night, I sat by the window of the bakery, looking out into the quiet street. The lights of the city flickered in puddles left by the rain, and I thought about that cold house, the one that's stolen from me. I realized it didn't belong to me anymore. It was just walls now, walls full of whispers and regrets. The real home I'd built was here, within myself, within the peace that Helen could never forge or steal. But still, as I blew out the candle by my bed, one thought lingered like smoke in the air. Forged signatures can steal a house, but not history. And for the first time, I felt ready to face what waited for me beyond forgiveness.
I never thought I'd see that house again. When I left it, I swore I would never set foot near it. Not the walls that heard my humiliation, not the floors that echoed with lies. But life has a strange way of circling back, dragging you toward the very thing you thought you'd escaped. That morning, I stood outside the gate I once called home. The paint was peeling, the garden overgrown. The place that once gleamed under the sun now looked gray, sick and tired, as if it had been holding its breath since I walked away. I felt no hate, just silence. The door opened before I could knock. Claire stood there, her eyes swollen, her voice trembling. "Mom, please, come in." The word mom still felt strange coming from her lips, but I stepped inside. The air was cold, not physically, something deeper, emptier. The walls seemed to hum with guilt. The bright curtains Helen once bragged about were gone, replaced by heavy drapes that kept out even the light. I followed Claire down the hallway, my footsteps soft against the floor I once polished myself. Then I saw him. Evan. He looked older, weaker. There was a tremor in his hands and a shame in his eyes I'd never seen before. When our eyes met, he hesitated, then dropped to his knees. "Lydia," his voice broke, "I don't deserve to speak to you. I believed everything. every lie she fed me. I didn't question. I just destroyed you. I stared at him quietly. The man who once told me to pack my things now knelt before me like a boy who'd lost his way. "Get up, Evan," I said softly. "The truth has already punished you enough." He looked up, tears pooling in his eyes. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't," I said. "Some things aren't meant to be fixed. They're meant to be faced." Claire reached for my hand, but her touch was trembling. "Mom, I tried to make her see. I tried to stop her, but she—" "I know," I said gently. "You don't have to explain." We walked together toward the bedroom. The door was half open, and the sound of ragged breathing filled the air. Helen. The woman who had built her comfort on my pain. She lay in bed, thin and frail, her face as pale as the sheets. The sight of her startled me, not because of pity, but because she looked like a shadow of the monster I remembered. Her eyes fluttered open and locked on mine. For a second, I saw recognition, then fear. "She's come to finish me," she rasped, clutching the blanket to her chest. "Don't let her near me." I didn't move closer. I didn't need to. I didn't come to finish anything, Helen. I came to end what you started. Her lips trembled. "You think you know everything, Lydia, but your daughter—" Her eyes darted toward Claire, who stood frozen in the doorway. "Your daughter kept one secret from you." I felt my heart stumble. "What are you talking about?" Helen's lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "Ask her." Her grip loosened and her hand fell limp against the sheets. I looked at Claire, my chest tight. Her face had gone pale. "Mom, please, not here, not now." I stared at her for a long moment, the girl I'd raised, the child who once believed I could fix anything. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I wanted the truth at all. I turned back to Helen, but she had closed her eyes. Whether asleep or simply done speaking, I couldn't tell. I walked out quietly. Claire followed me to the doorway, but I didn't speak. Outside, the sky was pale and empty. The air smelled faintly of rain, like the world was holding its breath again. I stood there, looking at the house that had taken so much from me, and whispered, "I came back to find peace, but peace has its own price." Then I walked away, feeling the weight of Helen's final words settle deep inside me, heavier than all the lies she had ever told. Because secrets don't die with the people who keep them. They live on, waiting for the right moment to be found. Weeks passed after that visit. Quiet, unremarkable weeks filled with the hum of the bakery and the rhythm of ordinary life. Yet beneath it all, something in me was waiting. I didn't know for what exactly. Maybe peace, maybe closure, maybe just a sign that the storm had truly ended. Then one morning, it arrived. A letter. It was pale and thin, the edges uneven, the handwriting faint, but familiar. Helen's. My hands trembled as I turned it over. There was no return address, only my name, written like an apology. For a long time, I couldn't open it. The woman who had once called me a witch, who destroyed my name, my home, and my dignity, what could she possibly have left to say? But something in me needed to know. I broke the seal. Inside was a single page, the ink shaky and smudged in places. "Lydia, you were the mother I could never be. I envied you more than I hated you. You loved what I couldn't love. People. That's why they loved you back. Maybe that's the real difference between us. I hope wherever I'm going, peace follows you first. Helen." I read it 3 times, each word sinking deeper, until the paper blurred through my tears. It wasn't forgiveness she offered. It wasn't even redemption. It was truth, the first honest thing she'd ever given me.
When I folded the letter, I didn't feel hatred anymore, only quiet sorrow for a woman who'd lived her life afraid of kindness. A few days later, another envelope came. This one wasn't trembling or smudged. It was neat, careful. Claire's handwriting. Inside was a confession I wasn't prepared for. Mom, I need to tell you the truth. I knew about the forgery. I saw the papers, and I stayed silent. I was scared. I didn't want to lose my husband, my comfort, or the life we'd built, even if it meant losing you. I told myself I was protecting peace, but I was protecting a lie. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed you to know. My eyes stung. I sat by the bakery window, watching the street outside blur through the glass. How many nights had I prayed that she'd remember who she was, that she'd see me not as a burden, but as her mother again? And now she had. I reached for my pen, my hand steady this time. On a clean sheet of paper, I wrote my reply. My dearest Claire, I forgave you long before you asked. Love doesn't die. It only learns where to live next. I lost my home once, but I found it again, not in walls or bricks, but in forgiveness. Be at peace, my child. The world has a way of mending those who choose honesty. Mom. I sealed it and handed it to the postman myself, feeling lighter than I had in years. That evening, as the last batch of bread came out of the oven, the bakery filled with the smell of warmth, cinnamon, sugar, and peace. Children from the neighborhood came running in, laughing, their hands sticky with frosting. One of them looked up at me and grinned. Miss Lydia, why are your eyes shining? I smiled. Because they finally see clearly. When the sun began to set, I flipped the sign on the bakery door to closed. The streets were quiet, bathed in the orange glow of dusk. I stood there for a long moment, watching the light fade. The same woman who once walked out of her own house in shame now stood inside a home she'd built with her own two hands, a home made of flour, love, and truth. They took my place once, but peace belongs only to those who earn it. Then I turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked out into the evening air, free, whole, and finally home.